Today is Friday, July 5th, so it's been 4 days, 3-4 days since I got the wing painted. I painted it on Tuesday. Well, it's firmed up pretty good and I've been working on it a little bit. I cut out the inspection holes and took the tape off and stuff like that off the things I had taped up. Yesterday I put the fuel tank in. I haven't got it set up yet, but I got it in. I still need to hook the hoses up and stuff for it. But anyway, it's coming along pretty nice. It doesn't hurt for it to hang there for another day or so before we start moving it. But like I said, the wing is coming along there, but I've got some stuff that needs to be painted before we go any farther. A few of the inspection covers were a little bit crusty on there, had some corrosion on it. I bought new inspection covers, but of course they're bare aluminum, so I want to get those cleaned up and painted to match the wing. And I've got a few other parts that needed to be painted to match the wing too. There's a stop there for the aileron stop that goes on the center aileron hinge. And then got the pitot tube. I cleaned it up earlier, fixed it up and primed it, but it needs to be painted a finish color. And then right there is the nav light bracket that fits on the end of the wing, and the navigation light mounts in it. That was showing some corrosion on it on a couple of spots, so I cleaned it up and we'll repaint it and put it back in. And then there's another square rectangular inspection cover for the new inspection port that I put in the wing of the airplane. It's getting a little blustery out here now. I'm not sure whether I'm going to be able to paint or not right now. I had everything set up here to do that. And then we got one more thing that's got to be painted, and these are the vortex generators. These get glued onto the top of the wing and they help keep the airflow over the wing stable and help actually reduce the stall speed. I took those all off of the old fabric and cleaned them up, and I got to repaint those or paint those and get those ready to glue back on the new wing cover. So anyway, I've mixed up some primer, so that's the first thing we'll do is put some primer on there. Then we'll let that set up, and then I've got a little bit of yellow left over. I'll see if I've got enough of that left over to do these parts here. Well, I cleaned up these inspection covers and stuff yesterday. You'd think they're brand new, they wouldn't take any cleanup on them, but put them in some Allodyne solution to Allodyne them first, and it wouldn't take the Allodyne solution, even though I'd washed them down with Crepsol ahead of time to try to make sure and get all of the oils and stuff off of them. Well, I wound up having to stick them in the acid bath for just a little bit and scrub them just a little bit with a Scotch-Brite to get them clean enough that when I put them in the Allodyne solution it took. So they're ready to go now. Now ideally I'd paint these in the paint booth, but the wing is still hanging in the paint booth and I don't want to get overspray on the wing. So I set up a little paint rack out here. I've done this before, but I've just got a couple ladders and put some stretchers between the ladders and hung everything up out here. It's not ideal, especially if the breeze is going to blow. But that's what I got to deal with here. Anyway, we'll see if we can't get some primer on there. Do something about those things clanging around like wind chimes right now. I waited a couple hours after I put the primer on those parts. This is a minimum of an hour, I think, 30 minutes to an hour. But anyway, out in the sunshine like this is probably a shorter time than that. But I was doing some other things. I went in and worked on the wing some more. It's too doggone hot in there in this weather to stay in there very long or work very long. And we went from 50 degrees to 75 degrees overnight. Anyway, I let it go for a couple hours or so on the primer, and then I just came out and sprayed the yellow on these parts. Wasn't too sure how it was going to work. When I finished up with the wing, I had between a quarter and a third of a quart of yellow left, so I closed it up and stuck it in the refrigerator to try to keep it from catalyzing on me. It had been in there for a couple of days. Well, I used a little bit of it yesterday to just with a little paintbrush to do a couple of touch-ups and some spots that were covered up with the masking tape when I took that out, and it worked okay there. But I just brought it in here and tried to mix it up, and most of that was all catalyzed and hard in the bottom of the container, so there was a little bit left on top. And I've got that little spray cup that goes on that mini Sata spray gun. It had just enough in there to fill it about half full. It didn't come out of there very nice, but it sprayed and it looks like it's flashing off pretty good, so I think we're going to wind up being okay on that. And I had enough left to do those 4 inspection covers, the pitot tube, the aileron stop, and that one cover, as well as the nav light attach fitting there. Almost forgot to do those little vortex generator pieces. So I was getting ready to walk away to go dump my paint out. I turned around and those things were sitting there. Oh man, I better do those. That was the whole point of doing this. So I get those things painted so I can get those glued on. So anyway, I got everything all painted. I had just enough. I dumped a little bit out in the garbage can, but not very much. So got all cleaned up, and those things look a lot better as they flash off than they did when they were sprayed on there. It looked like they went on kind of lumpy. Anyway, they're flashing out pretty good, and that covered it good enough. Good enough for who it's for. They actually look pretty darn good. We'll let those hang there the rest of the day and then put them away. It'd take a day or two for those to firm up enough that we can start handling them, but I don't need to do anything with those until we get the wing mounted up on the airplane anyway. They'll be ready for it when the time comes, which won't be too long, I hope. So I got one more piece. There's a fairing that goes on the false spar for the flap, and that had some corrosion around all the fastener points on that. So I went to town and got some paint stripper. I'm going to strip the paint off of that and clean up, scrub all those points where there's a little bit of corrosion on the screw heads, and then I'll have to repaint that. If I was someplace where I could go get a new one, I'd go get a new one instead of fooling with that one, but it cost me $200 to get that shipped here, plus the cost of whatever that fairing is. So we'll get it cleaned up, and while it won't be as good as new, it'll be pretty darn good when I get done with it. Here's what the wing looks like now. This is the butt rib. It was all closed up and nice and pretty, and now it's got holes in it. This is a hole here for the fuel gauge. Another one up here. This one will be for the fuel outlet. This one will be for the fuel inlet from the fuel pump and the belly tank. And you've got a hole here that the antenna cable will go into for the Marine VHF antenna. The cable penetration here for the flaps. Another fuel outlet hole here. Another antenna cable. Of course, I put the aileron cable in. I've got that fair lead put in there. So here's the aileron cable. Here's the fuel tank set up in there. I got new felts, cushions, liners on the straps for the fuel tank straps. A heck of a time getting that thing in there. That was a lot harder doing that with it vertical like that than it was with it laying on the sawhorses, but I still don't want to put this down on the sawhorses yet. It's been, what, 3-4 days since I painted it, and so that paint's still a little green. If I set it down there on anything, it's going to take impressions from it, even if I put towels or carpeting or something down on the sawhorses. So here's the holes. I just used a soldering iron with a pointed tip on it and figured out where those holes were and just held it on there and melted the fabric in there. So these are the ones on the rear spar, got the ones on the front spar. These ones here on these ribs, I've got to locate and figure out which ones I'm going to use with the cover that I have, because there's plenty of holes in there and not all of them are used on this cover that I have. Well, here's where the upper aileron cable comes through. I cut that out. That could be trimmed up a little bit more, but you never see that anyway because that's going to be covered up with that dome. And down here, again, I located the holes for the fairings that hold the cover on over the landing light. Do the same thing with those with the soldering iron. Now there's a couple more holes to be put in here to hold that nav light bracket on there, but I'm going to wait to do that And something I found out is those dollar patches that I got to use, they're definitely not the Dacron fabric or the poly fabric that I put on the airplane. They don't melt. Those things, I didn't like the looks of them when they went on there, and they don't melt out with a soldering iron like the fabric does. So hard to make a nice clean hole through there. And this right here, that has the wire in it for the nav light. Well, I come around this side. Again, we got the screw holes, the mounting holes for the landing light, and I've got my pad that I made for my tie-down strap. This cover is opened up. That's that drag strut in there, the Z strut or N strut or whatever. Now, in the pictures, this thing was turned sideways. It was turned the other way, which actually makes more sense because that would give you access to this pulley in here for the aileron cable. But on the airplane, on the old fabric, it was sitting like this, and if you turn it sideways, it gets into this grommet that goes around the wing struts. So I don't know which is the right way to do that, but turn it at the other direction. We don't really get into this Z strut to do much except look in there and look at it, but there's always a possibility of, we always get in there and lube that pulley for that aileron cable and check it and make sure it's not wearing and stuff. So I would say it probably should have been turned the other way, but it's too late now. So this is a hole here where the aileron cable goes through for the upper aileron control. There'll be a pulley right here, and that cable will go in through there and then out the top over there on the other side. This is another access hole here, and again, there's nothing in there except that does give you a little bit of working room to check on that aileron cable when it goes through there. Otherwise, I really didn't need to cut that one out, but it was cut out on the other fabric, so that's why I cut it out here. So here's my lower aileron cable. That's the one we left in the wing, and I've got it run through that little grommet that I put on there and then tied up there to that aileron hinge. Well, these things these seaplane grommets don't look quite as bad now. They got some paint on it, but the paint covered up a lot of ugly. I still don't like those things. So these two inspection covers here, top and bottom, I didn't open those up. There's no reason to. They're just for drag strut. This, I burned out that with the soldering iron. This is where the pitot tube is going to mount up to right there. We've got the 4 mounting holes, and then the main part of the pitot tube goes through that hole. And then this inspection cover here I opened up. So right in there is the tubes for the pitot tubes. And of course, grommets here for the jury struts. And then back here, I just cut out this. This is where the bell crank rod goes from the bell crank to actuate the flap. And I just cut that out. I almost forgot about that. And this is another one of those rectangular inspection covers. There were 2 round ones in the plans for that, and I put this square one in here, and this makes it a lot easier to get in here to work on this because there's a turnbuckle that gets hooked up in there onto that bell crank, and you got to safety wire that. And then I kind of butchered up my drain outlet as I lined it up with the fuel tank in there when I had the fuel tank sitting down, or the wing sitting down flat, and the fuel tank went in there. But once I got it in there now and tied down, it moved closer to that rip. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with that. That's ugly, and I'm just about sick about that. I thought about getting some MEK and wiping this all down and taking that off there and then putting a patch over that so it's centered more over it. I'm not sure what I'm going to do, whether I'm going to do anything with it or not. Paint's green, so now would be the time to do it, but this isn't a show airplane, so I guess not too happy with it anyway. So that's it. I think I'm done painting for a while now. I think this is the last piece that I've got to paint for now. That thing was in kind of rough shape. It had a lot of corrosion around the screw holes on it. I went to town yesterday and got a little pint of paint stripper. I wasn't sure how that was going to work because I haven't had much luck with a paint stripper here lately. But I laid that out on some plastic bags and coated all 4 sides with the paint stripper, rolled it up into plastic bags and let it sit overnight. It had taken the paint off of it pretty good. There was still primer down underneath the main paint, but it was softened up. Well, I wound up scrubbing it with Scotch-Brite pad and then getting the Alumabrite, the acid etch, and scrubbing it down and scrubbing all the screw holes and stuff in places where the corrosion was. Got that cleaned up nice and bright down to bare metal and shiny bright metal. And then I took a sponge and some Allodyne solution and sponged Allodyne solution on it and let that soak in, and especially around where the corrosion was on it. And I just got finished squirting some paint on it here a few minutes ago. Put some white DP primer on it first. Well, anyway, I think I'm done painting. I think there's a little bit of corrosion on a couple of the panels on the tail of the airplane, but I'm not going to worry about those for now. I want to get this plane back together and get it flying, and I can deal with those later. In fact, I made all those parts so I can make new ones if I have to, but like I said, I'm not too worried about them. The main thing is to get this plane in the air, and once I get it flying, then if I have time, I can deal with it later. This is all part of the wing rebuild, so I want it to look pretty good, and I think I've got everything all dolled up so that it's all pretty nice now. Firmed up enough now since I sprayed it. It's been about a half hour or so. It's been sitting out here in the sunshine at about 7 o'clock at night right now. I'm going to let that thing hang overnight. I wanted to get that finished. I've got to get the ladder loose here so I can get it over onto the hanger. Well, I've got to open up that big one door on the hanger on this side here so that I can get all of my stuff out of there, all my tools out of there and stuff. I'll get that out, put over on those old floors, burned up floors that came out of the bathhouse, to get those out of the way. And then I've got a crew coming Monday to move that wing out of the paint booth and get it over there on and set it up on the airplane. So I got to get that door opened up and get all those tools and stuff out of there, and then rig up sling and stuff for the wing to get it hoisted up and hold it up in the air so I can get it mounted up onto the fuselage. I'll get that done, and the mechanic is coming. I'm not sure, I haven't heard from him yet when he's coming, but hopefully he's coming in the not too distant future and we can get the annual done on that, get the airplane in the water and get to flying. Like I said, it's after 7 o'clock. It's Saturday night, so it's movie night. My son called a little while ago, said his car was broke down and he couldn't make it out here, so we loaded the dogs up in my pickup. My wife went into town to pick him up. They're going to run the dogs up on one of the mountain roads on the way out from town, and then we're going to have dinner and watch a movie. And he's bringing my granddaughter over, so that'll be fun. And my son is leaving for a month Monday, headed down south to Oregon. The company he works for is moving their offices, and he's got to move the server farm from where it's at now into a new spot. So he's got a month's worth of work for it ahead of him down there, as well as his normal work that he does for him. So he's going to be gone for a while. Anyway, this will be our last night together. We get a chance to sit around and visit and watch a movie or two. All right, that's enough for one day. I've been going since 7 o'clock this morning, so I don't know how many trips back and forth I've made from the hangar to the shop up to the basement and back and forth and back and forth. My feet are just getting tired. I'm ready to take a break, and I'm hungry. Judy's got hamburgers made up and potato salad and some other stuff for dinner tonight, so when those guys get here, we're going to have a feast.